This is probably the worst flying experience I've ever had. Have you ever had a flying experience that's been that everything that could go wrong did go wrong? Well, that's what my experience was, or that's what this experience was. Our flight was delayed over 27 hours, and we were pretty much stuck in America. We thought we were going to be stuck out of the country, but we did get into America, but we were stuck at not our final destination for over 24 hours. It was like 27 hours, I think, technically. And it wasn't our fault. If I'm being completely honest, I'm not having canceled flights. It's a normal thing, especially when Savannah and I travel for work, and with that, like, if you travel, you're just kind of inviting this stuff to happen, and it's bound to happen from time to time. But this one was particularly there's been 2 times in my life where my flight has been canceled over 24 hours, and this was one of them, and this one was by far probably the worst one. I will say that we did one thing that honestly saved us and made it a million times better than the past experiences with canceled flights, and I'll share that later in the video, and I highly recommend, if you can afford to do it, or if you can do it, to do it. But back to the canceled flight. So the reason that we went, or we were on this trip, was for work. We were shooting a wedding in the Dominican Republic, and the wedding went good. Getting down there was great, but coming back there was a couple of issues. One, Nashville was getting a really bad snowstorm, and because of that snowstorm in Nashville, that caused our flights to all be backed up and delayed. And also, it was back when every flight seemed to be short-staffed, and there wasn't a lot of available personnel, so there were less airplanes. Because of that combination, we were kind of expecting our flights to be delayed, but we just didn't expect them to be that delayed. Our flight leaving the Dominican Republic to Miami was late, and then because that flight was so late, that made our flight going from Miami to Nashville. We missed it. All of this was happening at 10 o'clock at night. Our flight was supposed to be at 10 o'clock from Miami to Nashville, and because of that, it was the last flight. And if you've ever flown on the last flight, then you know that if you miss that, then you're pretty much screwed. Now, traditionally, if you miss a flight, even if it's at night, worst case, they'll just put you on the first flight out in the morning, which is what I was expecting when we went to the counter. And we got to the counter, and that's where something that I never expected to happen actually did happen, and that's our flight. The next flight that we could get on was going to be 27 hours from the original flight. And I even tried figuring if we could go to another airline, and literally it was the one airline we were flying was the one available flight that we could get on. So we pretty much had no choice. Whenever your flight's canceled like that, then typically the airline will book you a hotel, which they did. They booked us in a hotel, but we had to pay for pretty much everything besides the hotel. We had to pay to get there, we had to pay for food, and we had to basically we were spending money that we didn't expect to have to spend, which can add up. If you've ever taken a detour, you know how much those finances can actually add up. And on top of that, when you check into a hotel, you have to typically be checked out by a certain time, which was 11 a.m. and that left us with a solid 15 plus hours that we had nothing. We just had to wander around Miami for 15 hours with our suitcases and our bags, which is an obvious issue. So we got on a new flight, but we're presented with a new problem, having a ton of time in the airport, and that's where this little hack, or hack if you want to call it, comes into play. So basically what we have is we have a travel credit card that allows us to get into lounges, and it is an upfront cost. I think it's like $700 a month. But I will say, if you travel at all, you get discounts on hotels and like a bunch of rental car places, and you don't have to buy food in airports that have lounges. And honestly, at the end of the day, we actually save money because of that. But all that being said, we were able to use that credit card to get us into the Centurion Lounge, where we spent literally the entire day, like from when it opened to when it closed. We sat there and we just treated it like an office space and worked. And I cannot imagine spending, well, I have done it before, but spending the day in the airport with that compared to spending the day in the airport without that, like sitting at your gate, really makes it makes or breaks the credit card's worth it. And like I said, we stayed there till they closed. The lounge closed at 10, and then we walked to our gate, but our flight was actually delayed by an hour, so we had to spend from 10 to 11 at the gate, and then it got delayed again for another like 45 minutes. We eventually got on the plane, and we flew back to Nashville and got in at like 2 a.m. And then when we got to the gate, we couldn't get off the plane. You know, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't really want to run, but I just decided to do it anyway. One, just to get fresh air, and two, there was another reason that will remain not mentioned that I'm hoping running will fix. But back to my story. We finally get into Nashville after this whole ordeal. We finally land in Nashville, and we're sitting at the gate. And then we're sitting there for 10 minutes, and then 15, and then 20, and then finally a flight attendant comes. Actually, the captain came on the loudspeaker and said that we're going to be waiting a bit longer, and it was because the sky bridge or the jet bridge, the thing that takes you from the plane to the terminal that moves on wheels, that was frozen, and they needed to de-ice it. So all in all, we ended up staying for almost an hour, just sitting at the gate, literally like 20 feet away from getting off this plane. And it's in the middle of the night. At this point, it's like 1 a.m, and we just want to go home. And they finally let us off. And I've never seen a group of people on a plane like get all their bags and rush and normally people kind of meander. Not this. No, everybody got their stuff and they booked it and they got off. It had to be some kind of record. And we eventually get home at 2 a.m. And yeah, that was the longest. It's not the worst. It's one of the worst travel days I've had, but definitely the worst one I've had recently. I have had some bad ones, and that one's definitely top 5. But yeah. All that being said, all the travel today was totally fine. We had no layovers. It was a straight shot from Nashville to California, which we're in right now. And the weather here is great. It was hot in Nashville, and it's 70s here. I couldn't complain.